Welcome to This Explainer. For years, it felt like we were all watching a Hollywood legend just kind of fade away. You'd see his face on a movie poster, rent it, hit play, and right away you could tell something was just off. His performances felt incredibly flat. That signature spark, that light in his eyes, it was completely gone. And honestly, people everywhere were just genuinely confused. So today, we're going to dive into the really perplexing end to Bruce Willis's career, and we'll uncover how the public and the media got the whole story completely, tragically wrong. Okay, so if you were online during the 2010s, you probably remember that fans and internet critics were absolutely brutal to the guy. People saw him pumping out literally dozens of low-budget, direct-to-video films, and the consensus was incredibly harsh. Everyone just figured he'd stop caring. Reviewers would absolutely tear into these performances. They'd see IMDb ratings tanking to abysmal scores like a 2.5 and just instantly assume he was cashing in on his famous name without putting in even an ounce of effort. It actually became this sad running joke online that if Bruce Willis was in a movie, it was pretty much guaranteed to be terrible.
And that right there brings us to the core mystery of our explainer today. Why would a self-made leading man, a guy who literally ground his way up from the absolute bottom, seemingly throw his entire legacy down the drain for a quick paycheck? It doesn't make sense, right? We're talking about an actor who fought tooth and nail to be taken seriously. Somebody who totally redefined an entire genre of film. To just suddenly stop trying, to willingly trash a lifetime of goodwill, that goes against literally everything we knew about his work ethic.
To really grasp the tragedy here, we have to look back at how he built his foundation. Bruce Willis had absolutely no industry connections. No rich parents, no easy foot in the door, nothing. He really grinded through the early 80s as an uncredited extra in dramas like The Verdict, just hoping to get noticed. Then, in 1985, America finally got to see that undeniable magnetic charm when he played a fast-talking, sarcastic detective on the smash hit show Moonlighting. He proved he had this incredible comedic timing. But the big leap, the moment that shifted everything, was 1988 with Die Hard. He went from a funny TV actor to an unshakable cinematic icon basically overnight.
Let's put the sheer scale of that breakthrough into perspective for a second. Die Hard was made on a $28 million budget. Solid investment at the time, sure, but it absolutely exploded at the worldwide box office, pulling in roughly $140 million. But it wasn't just about the money. Willis fundamentally changed the action genre. Before him, action stars were these invincible, muscle-bound Superman, right? Your Schwarzeneggers, your Stallones. But Bruce, he played a normal guy, a vulnerable, barefoot cop who got hurt, who complained, who actually bled. He proved you didn't need to be a bodybuilder to save the day, and man, that instantly cemented his A-list status for decades.
And the thing is, he was never just a one-trick pony. The 90s were absolutely his golden era. Just think about the staggering variety of these blockbusters. Pulp Fiction, The Fifth Element, Armageddon, The Sixth Sense. He was dominating the box office across so many different genres. Sci-fi, psychological thrillers, spark indie comedies, you name it, he crushed it. Yet behind the scenes, with all that fame and those massive paychecks rolling in, he stayed incredibly humble. He was just this grounded New Jersey guy who famously complained in interviews because he couldn't find a decent donut in London. He just never bought into his own hype.
But beneath all that blockbuster success, there was something far more fundamental anchoring him. Even at the absolute peak of his fame, Willis was fiercely devoted to his family. He openly said that his children were way more interesting to him than pretty much anyone else in Hollywood. For a guy who could command millions of dollars and the attention of the entire world, he actively chose his family over the illusion of fame. He didn't measure his success by box office numbers or awards, but by whether his kids felt loved and supported. That was always, without a doubt, his true north.
So fast forward to the late 2010s, and the contrast is just staggering. His reputation had completely plummeted. Critics started calling this era an exploitation factory of direct-to-video movies. It was this totally jarring shift, right? Going from his 1990s dominance to movies that were just universally panned. He went from starring in visionary, Oscar-nominated masterpieces to churning out 5, 6, sometimes even 7 practically unwatchable action thrillers a single year. Naturally, fans felt betrayed, and the media? Well, they were just ruthless in mocking what looked like a massive fall from grace.
But here's the thing. Behind all those terrible reviews, something deeply disturbing was actually happening on set. Internet sleuths and crew members started noticing these bizarre anomalies that went way beyond just bad acting. He was wearing an earpiece, an earwig, to be fed his lines because he seemingly couldn't memorize even basic dialogue anymore. He'd spend huge chunks of these movies just sitting expressionless in chairs, looking completely checked out. Productions were heavily relying on body doubles for super basic, non-dangerous actions, and most terrifyingly, while filming the movie Hard Kill, he allegedly fired a gun loaded with blanks on the wrong cue, putting the crew in real danger. The Hollywood Whisper networks knew it. Something was fundamentally wrong.
The absolute breaking point for audiences came with movies like Hard Kill, where he only had 7 minutes of total screen time. And listen, this wasn't an accident. This was a highly calculated business model by certain producers. Their strategy? Pay an aging star a massive chunk of money for just a day or two of very limited work, slap their face front and center on the movie poster, and then pre-sell the film to foreign markets based entirely on that star power. Audiences who paid for a Bruce Willis movie felt completely scammed. They thought he was barely even trying, just loaning out his face for a quick buck.
But it didn't take long for directors and crew members to realize this wasn't just some lazy actor cashing in. There's this heartbreaking story where director Jesse V. Johnson finally got some alone time with Bruce on set. Bruce looked at him and asked, "I know why you're here, and I know why you're here, but why am I here?" Let that sink in. He wasn't just fumbling lines or being difficult. The man genuinely did not know where he was or what he was doing. He was deeply confused, terrified, and slowly losing his grasp on reality, all while the cameras were still rolling.
Finally, in March of 2022, the tragic reality broke through all that cruel Hollywood gossip. His wife, Emma, announced his retirement, revealing his initial diagnosis of aphasia. Now, if you don't know, aphasia is a communication disorder caused by brain injury or disease, and it profoundly impacts cognitive abilities. It literally affects a person's ability to talk, understand, read, and write. Bruce wasn't stepping back from serious acting by choice, and he definitely wasn't phoning it in. He was actively losing the physiological ability to process language and communicate with the outside world. But tragically, it didn't stop there. Less than a year later came a devastating secondary diagnosis, frontotemporal dementia, or FTD. Medical professionals often describe this specific condition as literally hell on earth. Unlike Alzheimer's, which usually hits memory first, FTD happens when brain cells die off in the frontal and temporal lobes. This disease slowly, ruthlessly strips away a person's entire self. It starts with dramatic, completely uncontrollable shifts in their personality, their speech, and their basic comprehension of the world around them.
The brutal realities of severe dementia go so far beyond what most of the public understands. I mean, we're not talking about simply being forgetful or misplacing your keys. We are talking about enduring severe confusion, terrifying hallucinations, sudden bouts of paranoia, unpredictable violent outbursts, and eventually forgetting basic motor skills, things like how to swallow, how to sit down, or how to put on clothes. It's an incredibly dangerous, complex disease that transforms a loved one into someone completely unrecognizable, requiring constant 24/7 vigilant supervision.
And the toll this takes on families? It is absolutely staggering. Emma Hemming shared this deeply jarring statistic from her neurologist. 30% of caregivers actually die before their loved ones do. Take a second to process that. That is how extreme the physical and emotional exhaustion of full-time dementia caregiving truly is. Between the sleepless nights, the constant physical demands of moving and protecting the patient, and the sheer crushing grief of watching someone you love fade away, the stress literally breaks the caregiver's body down.
Despite this agonizing reality, Bruce's family faced a really cruel wave of online backlash when they decided to place him in a separate home with round-the-clock professional care. Internet commenters, who obviously lacked any empathy or understanding of the disease, were super quick to accuse them of abandonment. But here's the truth. Round-the-clock professional care wasn't abandonment at all. It was an absolute medical necessity. Caring for someone experiencing severe confusion, lack of physical coordination, and potential outbursts requires specialized, highly trained staff just to keep them safe. It was a decision made entirely out of protection, not convenience.
And that really brings the whole story full circle, because this separate home, it isn't far away. It's right down the street within super easy walking distance of his family. Setting things up this way gives the family the medical and physical support they need. That way, when they are with him, they don't have to be exhausted nurses. They can just be his family. They can focus entirely on being present, sharing those little moments of joy, and showering him with the overwhelming, unconditional love he's always prioritized his entire life.
Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder. Bruce Willis might not remember his iconic, genre-defining roles anymore. He might not remember the massive box office numbers or the millions of fans he entertained over the decades. But when he sees his family, he feels their presence. He feels their warmth, their safety, and their love.
He didn't lose his story to Hollywood exploitation. Actually, he completed his story exactly how he always wanted to, surrounded by his family. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this provided some clarity on what is a truly heartbreaking but beautifully human story. Catch you next time.